Good evening, everybody.
Hello, hello.
Welcome to another episode of Critique Corner with me, Daniel Parker.
And me, DB Fastbinder. Yes, Critique Corner, the show where we review whatever the heck we feel like.
Indeed, yes. And if you are returning, welcome back. If you're new, what we do is just as DB said, we review stuff that we feel like watching. Usually something new or recent, and then something classic. Um, but before we get into all of that, we like to talk about the box office.
Yes. So, Daniel, this may be a shock to you because there
Hmm.
definitely haven't been roughly 5 million YouTube videos with various types of attractive thumbnails showing this off, but the Joker movie may have underperformed slightly.
Yeah, I think I heard something about that. Yeah,
Yeah, kind of a sleeper news story.
yeah. Yeah, with that massive hurricane coming at Florida, I think
Yeah.
some people might not remember it.
Yeah. Um, so, in all seriousness, Joker Folly Adieu managed to come in not only under the Marvels, but it came in under frickin' Morbius.
Yeah, man, you got to be you got to be a pretty bad movie if you're going to come in below Morbius.
Yeah, and what I think the thing that astounds me the most is that other people are astounded.
Yeah.
Like the whole time along I was hearing about this movie, I said to myself, like, I don't see how anybody would possibly want this.
Yeah, I remember when the news broke that not only were they doing the sequel, but it was also going to be a musical. I think at the time I'm like, what are they thinking here? That sounds like a bad idea.
Yeah, and for that matter, like I was the idea of like Lady Gaga as Harley, it was a change for Margot Robbie, which it's funny. Harley Quinn was really the first Margot Robbie character I encountered. Um, I did at the time. I said, "Oh, okay, she's putting on a really good accent," and then I discovered that was basically how she sounded American instead of like what is she Australian?
Yes, yeah, Australian. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, so,
She had the same accent in Wolf of Wall Street.
yeah. So I became slightly less impressed with it.
Yeah,
But anyways, like a new Harley Quinn seemed kind of interesting.
yeah.
Um, but at the same time, I never actually saw the original Joker just because honestly, the Joker as a character is one that I'm kind of tired of, just in general.
Yeah. Um, I think it's well the thing with it. I mean, he's the most recognizable of Batman's rogues gallery. I mean,
Right.
he's the one that like I mean, he's the yin to Batman's yang, and that's why I think there's so much interest around him. And of course, I think Heath Ledger kind of set the bar pretty high in terms of how to play the character. Whether you liked his performance or not, it was it set the tone going forward.
That might be part of the problem is just that because it's like for a lot of people who don't actually care about comic books or the larger Batman lore, that version of Joker is solidified in their mind. And I've heard people suggest that everybody who's played Joker ever since is trying to one up Heath Ledger, which you're probably not going to do that.
No, yeah, that's how we ended up with Jared Leto's Joker.
Yeah. At least if you're not going to beat him at the same game,
Mhm.
um, you could probably do better than him if you like were trying to do like just a classic clown prince of crime approach, like out of the 1989 Batman.
Right, yeah, or even channel Mark Hamill's Joker.
Right, where he's like halfway between silly Joker and serious Joker.
Yeah,
But yeah, no, this is a huge disaster. What's interesting is that I heard suggestions that it sounded like the movie was initially coming in at 40 million, but then the actual result was 37 and a half roughly. In that 2.5 million of that was them having to account for on the day refunds of people like leaving the movie halfway through.
Oh, oh,
That's an unusual number of refunds.
it is. Yeah. I don't. God, actually, I don't know if I've ever heard that before with a movie. Wow.
I mean, the thing managed to get itself a D cinema score,
Yeah.
which, for those who don't know, cinema score is basically like an exit poll because there are certain nobody's quite sure what their methodology is, but they basically just hang around a movie that's on opening night and just ask the audience, "Hey, what did you think of that?" Which
Yeah.
is why cinema score ratings tend to be graded on a very high curve. Like it's usually A minus. It's unusual to actually get down into the Bs
Yeah.
because you aren't dealing with like objective criticism. You're dealing with did people who went out to the movies uh, expecting a certain type of movie get the type of movie they were expecting.
Yeah. Mm.
So clearly,
Yeah.
nobody was expecting this movie.
No. Yeah. Well, whatever their methodology they're using, I'm sure it's probably similar to the exit pollings in elections. So keep
Yes.
that in mind next month.
Yeah. Uh, Speaking of absolutely nothing to do with the previous topic,
Yeah.
uh, coming in at number two last weekend, Wild Robot had a pretty good hold, uh,
Mhm.
47% drop. Not the biggest numbers, but since it was a pretty modestly budgeted movie to start with,
Yeah. What was it?
uh,
80,
78. So,
78. Okay. Yeah.
so
Close.
sorry,
Yeah.
you lose by Price is Right rules.
Darn it.
Um, yeah, it's doing fine. I've heard nothing but good things about it.
Yeah, I have to. Yeah.
Um, my coworker who went to it basically said that he was crying, which
Mm.
is why I haven't actually gone out to watch it because I haven't felt like a good cry.
Yeah. Yeah. Me neither.
But good on it. I suspect it's going to be in theaters probably at least through Thanksgiving weekend. Like I would think that this type of family movie they would try to give it some legs,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
but we'll see.
Uh,
Um, Number three, Beetlejuice, which is still raking in money 5 weeks out
Yeah.
with a $10 million cum.
Yeah. That more than likely will make its money back.
Let's see. I wonder if it already has. Let's see.
100 million.
$100 million. Yeah, if you go with like the usual 2.5 to 3 times budget, especially helps when they get more of the U.S. take, and about 2/3 of the money is coming from the U.S.
Yeah.
So that's interesting that that's keeping those legs because what it kind of sounds like is a lot of really diehard Beetlejuice fans weren't super satisfied with it. But
Mm.
honestly, like, it's like how many diehard Beetlejuice fans are there? That they're probably just appealing to the people who want to go. "Me- Remember sandworms on Jupiter? I remember.
Oh, I remember. Yeah. Remember the shrunken heads? Oh, I remember. I remember.
Yeah, it was kind of weird. I was watching some movie on Max a few weeks back for our reviews, and they had a whole bunch of ads featuring those shrunken head guys.
Hmm.
I forget what they were advertising. It was some sort of credit card company, I think.
Probably like Capital One or something like that.
Yeah, so they were like out there shopping.
Yeah.
Maybe it was eBay or Amazon. Either
Mm.
way.
Yeah.
Um, Now, speaking of classic franchises that aren't doing so hot, Transformers 1.
Mm.
Third place at 5 million. And in 3 weeks, it's behind Wild Robots at 2 weeks, and it couldn't outperform Beetlejuice at uh, 5 weeks.
Mm. I think that I think there's probably a lot of fatigue with that franchise, and I also heard a theory floating around. It might have been what's his name from Clownfish.
Neon.
Neon, thank you. That the IDW comic books really messed up the people's love for Transformers with certain creative choices that they made.
Hmm. Uh, y- I guess I'd have to look up like what the I'd have to look up what the actual circulation of those things were, though.
Yeah,
I guess people who were buying Transformers comics would be they would be like the decision makers, right? Or they'd be the people influencing guys to go like, hey, I love Transformers. Want to go watch some Transformers tonight?
yeah.
Kind of like
Although,
I would have been the person to drag people to Star Wars movies in the past.
yeah, and yeah, same with me in Star Trek. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that's probably true. But yeah, I'm. Although, to be fair, like I think this is only like the second animated Transformers movie that's ever been made, and people probably don't remember this, but the first Transformers animated movie bombed at the box office when it came out.
Right? I mean, although in that one they had the excuse that, well, of course, you killed Optimus Prime, and all the kids told their friends that they cried like a baby because Optimus Prime died in the movie.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. They kind of screwed that up, didn't they?
Yeah. Um, but it's a shame. Transformers 1 was a good movie. Reviewed it a few weeks back. I would say that if you have even a passing interest in Transformers or just, you know, animated sci-fi in general, go give it a watch.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah. It's
rounding
coming
up.
out on digital on the 24th.
Yeah, so might be better off waiting for that. I have a feeling that Transformers 1 is going to be one of those movies that doesn't do well at the time, but is well remembered.
Yeah,
And it probably get some sort of, I who knows, maybe it'll hit well, it'll hit Paramount Plus, and then no one will notice because it's Paramount Plus. But it could be that they license it to Netflix at some point, and it suddenly has a huge pop.
yeah. It's sort of like with Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, whoever at Paramount is in charge of marketing just needs to go.
Yeah.
But I suppose I should speak no evil. Which, hey, that was our
Mm.
number 5 movie.
Ooh,
Uh, which small horror movie starring Professor X from the First Class movies.
yeah, yeah,
It's yeah, probably doing okay.
yeah.
Um, Speaking of X-Men, Deadpool, Wolverine, why won't you die? Because isn't this thing already on digital?
Yes, yeah,
Yeah. Like it's bleeding theaters. It's not. It's per theater average dipped under 1,000, but it's been out for almost 3 months and it's still sitting in the top 10, which is either a endorsement for it or an indictment of what else we've been given.
yeah. Well, I mean, Joker ain't pulling people to the theaters, that's for sure.
Yeah. No.
Uh,
Number 7, we've got a movie that I heard a review of on Film Threat, White
mm,
Bird: A Wonder Story, which is uh, which is a Holocaust movie set place in France.
yeah. Helen Mirren is in it.
Yes. What's funny is that it sounds like it's one of those movies where they use British accents as a stand-in for foreign accents in general.
Mm. Sort of like our movie this week.
Yes. Uh, it sounded like it was actually pretty good, but it also it's one of those things where I think it is kind of important to periodically have Holocaust movies, because just because you've seen a Holocaust movie and know all about it doesn't mean that other people don't.
Yeah.
I I saw a tweet, and of course, like any tweet, this could just be somebody making things up. But it was a history teacher saying that he got to 9/11, and all of
Mm.
the kids freaked out because they thought it was just a meme, and like they were just stunned that it was real.
Oh boy. Oh. Mm. And
Yeah.
mm. Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah, I think that. And to go back to the Holocaust. I think uh, Schindler's List should probably be required viewing.
Yeah, probably. It just makes you a more complete person.
Yeah,
Although I say that having not seen it myself, but I've read plenty of the actual history, so it's
yeah. I've seen. Yeah, I saw that that the Italian movie. Life is Beautiful.
oh
Yeah,
who is it that some comedian had an unreleased movie called The Day the Clown Cried,
Jerry
where
Lewis.
Jerry Lewis, that's it.
Yeah.
Man, I wonder if that's ever going to actually get like some sort of release.
I don't know. I was actually wondering that the other too because he passed away about like 3 or 4 years ago, and I think he
Yeah.
said that as long as he was alive, it was never going to get released unless his kids are like, yeah, we're not putting it out.
Yeah, we're respecting your dad's legacy.
Yeah.
S- Speaking of legacy, we've got The Substance.
Mm.
Uh, that seems like a bit of a tangent, but yeah, there we go. Um,
Do you see how many theaters it's in?
686.
Oh, 86. Okay.
686, yeah.
Whew.
Uh, yeah. But it outdid Megalopolis, which, yeah, sounds like it was just a general mess. It already didn't make any money its first weekend, and it dropped 73% its second. So it's,
Yeah, all I can say is, Coppola, I hope selling off some of your wine business was worth making that movie.
yeah. You know what he'd tell you to do? He'd tell you to kiss my old ass, which was our number 10 movie.
Ah, yeah.
But yeah, so not the not a good setup for uh, a thriving October. I think the strangest thing here is that this doesn't really feel like a very horrific slate uh, for a Halloween month, which makes me wonder how many horror movies decided to try to avoid um, what do you call it? Tried to avoid being in the Joker's shadow, and man, that would have been perfect counter programming.
Oh, yeah, would have. Yeah.
So
Well,
I suspect we'll start seeing some more horror releases next week.
yeah, yeah, I think so too. Yeah.
Oh well, it's one of those moments where I'm glad I'm not a I don't own stock in any entertainment companies.
Yeah, same here. At least not anymore. Yeah.
Yep.
Uh,
Um, so let's get to our first review. I don't have a fun transition. Uh,
mm,
we decided to review the most recent Garfield movie starring Chris Pratt.
yes, this was my recommendation. Very sorry.
You will be suitably chastised. But
Yes. Yeah.
so for as an adult who grew up with Garfield, this movie felt strange.
It did. Yeah.
So I think that there's a couple different ways we could look at this. Like, would I recommend this for adults? Is this like one of those nostalgic trips down memory lane where it's like, oh yeah, I remember that from Garfield, and I remember that from Garfield. They kind of have that in the first 10 minutes as they're setting up the characters on the assumption that some kids don't know who he is.
Yeah, like him loving to eat, and lasagna
Mhm.
is his favorite food, and he hates Mondays, and yeah.
Yeah. So they kind of speed run all the really nostalgic bits.
Yeah.
So and I would say that the movie as a whole doesn't really offer a lot to somebody with a how to put it, a context for what good movies are.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. Daniel, give us the quick overview of this movie.
Okay, so the beginning of the movie, as DB pointed out, is kind of like this bit of the origin story for Garfield. Um, we meet him as a kitten, he's appears to have been abandoned by his father. But then he walks over to the Italian restaurant and he sees John Arbuckle eating dinner by himself, and then uh, Garfield proceeds to eat all of John's dinner, and from then on there out, Garfield is, as Garfield says, that's when he adopted John.
Yep. Uh,
Yeah, and so from there we also meet Odie, who just kind of like shows up, which
Yeah,
is a little weird.
you know what I was honestly expecting? I thought that the plot of the movie was going to be about Garfield having a comfortable life with John, and then like Odie would suddenly show up and it would be Garfield's friction with Odie. But then I realized that that was basically the plot of the first Bill Murray Garfield movie from 20 years ago.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so they didn't do that in this one, and actually, like Garfield and Odie are very chummy in this, which uh isn't really canonical with Garfield, because like
Yeah,
the running gag with Garfield is that he's always kicking Odie off the table.
right. And also it's like Garfield is like, to use some weeb terminology, is very tsundere towards him.
Yeah,
Because like he has affection for Odie, but he's always reluctant to show it.
right. Yeah. And so then the main story kicks in where Garfield and Odie are kidnapped by these two very big mangy dogs.
Well,
Uh,
one big dog and one like little hairless thing.
right, yeah, and then as they're kind of swinging from a rope in an abandoned shopping mall, uh, Garfield's long lost father, Vic, who is voiced by Samuel L. Jackson, shows up to rescue him. But they get caught by Garfield and Odie's kidnapper. What was her name?
Oh man, you're expecting me to remember that? Oof. I was hoping you would.
I want to say Liz.
I think Liz is the name of the vet, wasn't it?
Oh, that's right. Liz is the vet.
Um,
Who's barely in the movie, by the way. Um, so is John. Um,
yeah, like Liz has one scene.
yeah. Jinx.
That's right. That's
Jinx,
right.
and Jinx is voiced by Hannah Waddingham, who she's the owner of the soccer team in Ted Lasso, the tall blonde.
Okay, that's what I knew her from.
Yeah, and so oh, and one of the dogs was voiced by uh, the one soccer player, the real cantankerous one. What was his name? Roy Kent. Yeah, Roy Kent. He,
Oh, okay.
yeah,
So that's an interesting connection there.
yeah. Um, but uh, but but so Jinx and Vic, Garfield's dad, used to run in the same crew together, and she wants Vic, Garfield, and Odie to steal like 2,000 quarts of milk for her, because
Right.
she got caught when they were trying to uh, break into the farm to steal all the milk.
Yeah, like Lactose Springs or whatever.
Lactose, yeah,
Oh, I might be. I'm almost certainly getting the name wrong, but that's just basically,
yeah. It was lactose something, yeah.
yeah. And from there, there's this plot that it doesn't really feel like a Garfield movie. But as I was thinking about it, like if you asked me to write a screenplay for a 90-minute movie about Garfield, I think I would actually kind of struggle to come up with something that would last 90 minutes.
Yeah, same here because, well, one, I mean, he's based on a comic strip, so
Right.
you're talking about like Jim Davis, who was the creator of Garfield, would do a comic strip, and he'd have to tell a story in 3 panels,
Right.
and yeah, and then of course then the animated shows were all half-hour shows, and they do them in like you know 7 to 8 minute segments.
Right, and then on the first cartoon show, they even had U.S. Acres, Jim Davis's other failed comic strip, to pad it out,
Right. Yeah.
which is the only reason anybody knows about that comic strip today.
Yeah.
Uh, and they had some longer stories, but those are usually like 40 minutes TV specials.
Yeah, like a Christmas special or Halloween special or yeah.
Right, exactly. And what it kind of felt like they did here was it's like they had a couple of ideas on the cutting room floor for a kids movie story, and they just kind of shoved Garfield and Odie into it.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. Which seems to be par for the course for a lot of movies these days is they just take a concept that they have for a certain movie and then just shove it into an existing IP because like, oh, the existing IP, that's going to make us money, because it's recognizable. Like,
Yeah,
mm,
I'm going to be honest. If this had just shown up on Netflix as, Sony Animation presents Catastrophe and the Great Milk Caper or whatever, like, we wouldn't have bothered to watch it. So you know what, the cynical IP ploy has some merit to it.
yeah, it does. Yeah.
Um, so again, like, if you're somebody who like has any sort of sophistication with your movie choices, you aren't going to like this
Mm,
because there's like a couple of moments that are mildly amusing, but that's basically as far as it goes.
yeah. And you could kind of tell too that like they were padding the running time because they would really milk a joke longer than they needed to.
Yeah, and they kept throwing in a lot of there's a lot of subplots in this, and I
Yeah.
just like don't feel like Garfield should be involved in them.
Yeah, yeah. This movie kind of reminded me of the Scooby Doo movie that came out like 3 or 4 years ago, where they tell the origin story of how Shaggy and Scooby meet, and then how they meet the rest of the gang, and then it just kind of like dovetailed into something else entirely, and had absolutely nothing to do with Scooby Doo at all. Part of me wonders if the creative both of these movies had the same creative teams involved.
Oh yeah, didn't that Scooby movie basically turn into like a Dynamite and Blue Falcon movie?
Yes, it was. That's exactly what it was. Yeah.
Oof, that
Yeah.
that- yeah, because this was basically really about Vic dealing with his issues as an absentee father, and also there's like this weird subplot with this bull and cow who were star-crossed lovers, where there's a lot of things in like the logistics of the movie that don't make a lick of sense.
Yeah.
Uh, like it was a small family farm that made this excellent milk. It seems like I think her name was Clarabelle. I'm just going to call her Clarabelle. Clarabelle was like
Yeah.
seemingly the only cow at this place, but the family farm went under and it was bought out by a big company. And then like they just went super industrial, but they're still cranking out huge amounts of milk and cheese off of this one cow. And there's no
Yeah.
indication that there are any other cows at this place.
Yeah. Unless it's like some weird synthetic milk and that they're using, but I highly doubt it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the bull is just sitting on the sidelines, sadly looking upon his lost love. Actually, that's kind of a running theme for this movie, is just people who are stuck on the outside looking in on something they love.
Yeah.
Because that turns out to be the Vic's deal with his son Garfield. Um,
Yeah.
Now, what's kind of funny is that, boy, boy Hollywood, way to not be a racist, cast Samuel L. Jackson to be an absentee father who's a criminal.
Yeah. Way to go. Oof.
So yeah, it's just not a good movie in my opinion.
Yeah.
Now, if I look at the question of is this an all right movie for kids, Daniel, what's your take?
Uh it depends on how old the kids are. I would say like 4 to 7 is probably a good age range, and anything any older than that, and those kids are probably going to get bored really fast.
Yeah, because there's like a lot of frenetic action in sections. Um, I will say that in movies' strong points from like a writing perspective, they did a pretty good job of setting or like a setup and payoff. Like early on in the movie, Garfield orders food with drone delivery and goes, "Oh, I love the future." And then later on in the movie, when they need a like a rescue, he suddenly orders a whole bunch of food, which causes a flight of drones to come,
Yeah. Yeah.
which they use to escape. It's like that was kind of clever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Elephant in the Room that everybody was complaining about before the movie came out. Casting Chris Pratt as a Garfield.
He doesn't work as Garfield.
Not very well, no.
Yeah.
The other thing that was just wrong was his lips moved the entire time. That isn't how Garfield is supposed to work.
No, Garfield talks with his thoughts. Yeah.
Which, mind you, would be weird if you had all these other characters talking with their lips, but that's never stopped them before.
Yeah.
Like as soon
Yeah.
as the movie started and he was introducing himself and started moving his lips, I was like, "What the hell is this?"
Like, oh no. I think of the one cartoon show from like the 2010s. I think his lips moved when he talked.
Then, then he is truly lost.
Yes. Uh, yeah, but yeah, I will say with Chris Pratt, like I liked him better as Mario than I did as Garfield.
Definitely works better.
Yeah.
Because like what Chris Pratt brings to the table is that he has this everyman quality where Garfield is not like Mario's everyman. Garfield is not everyman. He's supposed to be kind of a weird, goofy character.
Yeah. He's a fat lazy cat who hates Mondays. That's
Yeah,
yeah.
it's not that deep.
Yeah.
Actually, now that I think about it, I think that might be part of this movie's problem is that so a few years back, I want to say it was Illumination Studios did a loving portrayal of the Peanuts. I think it was them. Maybe it was Blue Sky. Um,
Yeah, it was one of those two. Yeah. No, yeah, yeah, I
yeah,
remember the movie, but I can't remember who made it. Yeah.
but like for everything I understand, the movie was like very heavily regulated by the Schultz family,
Mhm.
and their objectives. Uh, like in their objectives, it was to just make sure that it was like a loving tribute to the man. So like no funny business. It was just like a bunch of highlights of the series.
Yeah.
Um, and but now I think about it, like if you think about Peanuts versus Garfield, Peanuts has a lot of because Peanuts has a lot more characters. They have a lot more bits to reference. Where Garfield really it's just him, John, and Odie,
And occasionally normal.
and occasionally normal. Yeah, like there is a cast of characters, but none of them are particularly developed because
Yeah.
it's just a silly gag comic. It's like it's something you're supposed to read uh, for a few years and then you move on.
Right. Yeah. It's something you see in the funny pages. You would see in the funny pages of the newspapers, and then all right, all right, we'll see what
Yep,
happens to them tomorrow. Yeah.
exactly. Now, as far as like there are things here that are mildly inappropriate for kids. There are some oddly scary bits with the villain. Like
Yeah.
she has this like mood necklace that glows, and they just always frame her in very like I could see the target small kid audience getting disturbed by her.
Yeah. It kind of. She definitely had a Disney villain quality to
Yeah,
her.
yeah, kind of like kind of channeling Yzma from The Emperor's New Groove.
Yeah.
Um, there's reference. In fact, she even eats a little bird voiced by Jeff Foxworthy, apparently.
I didn't know
Uh,
that was Jeff Foxworthy. Wow.
yeah,
Huh.
I was just looking over IMDb and I was a little shocked myself.
Wow.
But he was like a blink and you miss it cameo because I wonder if he was supposed to be a blue bird to represent Twitter because he was talking in like soothing platitudes.
Oh, probably. Yeah.
But like, yeah, she just ate him.
Yeah.
So parents might want to be careful of that. And also, like, early on, they make like when somebody finds out that John went to the restaurant alone, somebody says, "Yeah, you should get on the dating apps like Tinder and Bumble." It's like,
Like,
why is there a Tinder reference in this small child's movie?
yeah. Like, ooh, okay. Yeah.
Um, Talking about the animation for a moment, it was fine.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, it was all right. They're definitely trying to channel illumination in terms of the style.
Yeah, and definitely like they do get some of the visual references right. Like certain ways that Garfield moves are comic strip accurate.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of the new characters don't look like they would fit in the comic strip.
No, especially his dad.
Yeah, and the bowl too. Now, some of it could just be that they added more details to make the characters distinctive in 3D.
Mm,
I don't know if they would have asked Jim Davis to design the characters for them. Like that seems like something they should have done, but
yeah. Yeah.
couldn't say if they did or not. Of course, Daniel, there was one moment early on in the movie where I said, "Oh, this is going to be one of those Sony movies."
Oh, yes.
Uh,
The obligatory product placement. Yeah.
Yes. Basically, there are two types of Sony movies in general: normal movies that Sony just happens to make, and then movies where it's like, oh no, the villain who is not using a Sony product is on the loose. I have to use my Sony cell phone to use to use whatever messenger service paid for the advertising to call my friend who is on his Sony laptop playing video games, playing a PlayStation video game that's imported to PC. Uh, and he'll say, "Oh, hey man, you need some photo evidence. Let me get my high quality Sony camera here so we can go down and solve the crime."
Yeah.
This was more in the second camp. There was really only the one reference I noticed, but that's because it was mostly a cast of characters who were non-humans who didn't use a lot of tech anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
forgettable, not a great movie. If you have kids, your kids probably deserve better.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Well, just have them watch Mario again.
Yeah, like if you need a Chris Pratt CGI animated movie, just have them watch Mario again.
Yeah.
Speaking of the same thing kind of repeated,
Yes.
we decided to watch the second My Hero Academia movie, which just dropped on Twitter on Netflix. Excuse me.
Netflix. Yeah.
It's, what's funny is that I was looking at Deku on the right there, and the blue made me think Twitter for some reason.
Yeah. Well, it is kind of a similar color there. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah. Yeah. So part of the this is of course part of the whole My Hero Academia, movie verse, which seems to be kind of separate from the TV show and the manga.
yeah, it's interesting because the first movie, I believe that the way the creator said is that the characters are canon, but the events might not be,
Mm,
which I think was maybe just a way for him to use the characters how he wanted to in the manga later.
yeah.
Um, this movie is definitely in the vein of a classic Shonen Jump battle manga movie spinoff that has no bearing on the actual plot of the main series.
No, it really doesn't.
Uh, and I'd say that the gold standard for the ones we've watched here was that Black Clover movie because
Yeah.
that one did everything right. It had a villain who had a fairly distinctive personality, a clear motive, and he was actually like some sort of mirror on the main character.
Yeah. Yeah, and this one kind of tries to do that um, with its villain, Nine, um, actually he was mirroring well, the main villain of My Hero Academia.
All for
Okay,
one.
All for One. Okay, yeah, I always get
Me too. I always have to think hard about.
yeah, yeah. All for One is the bad guy, and then One for All is the good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, so it's basically like a prelude of. So this is shortly in the series after, spoiler alert, All Might finally gives up the ghost on his powers, like after his last big push.
yeah, and also looks like it takes place sometime after what was it, season 5, I think. Because at the beginning of the episode or at the beginning of the movie, there's this high speed car chase that Endeavor stops, and Endeavor has the scar
Oh yeah,
over his eye from the beginning of the season when he got into the battle and he wrecked his eye really badly.
yeah. Um, and what this almost feels like is it's like an apology for the first movie, because the first movie's sin in the eyes of a lot of my friends who watched it and were big on the series was that only certain characters got to have any sort of focus.
Yeah,
Like, because because the first movie was basically Die Hard with superheroes, and there were certain characters in the cast who would just have immediately bent the problem over the desk and had their way with it because of their
yes,
powers. To be needlessly graphic about a kids movie, but
yeah, yeah, yeah. When they have to climb up the side of the building, and Sue Froppy would have done that very easily, but no, they had to have Mineta doing it with his
right,
sticky hair.
because that was actually a challenge for him, where for her that would have just been a mild warm up at best.
Yeah,
But yeah, so basically the kids are on an island. They are on their work studies. They're doing a lot of missions that aren't all that exciting, much to Bakugo's annoyance.
yeah, they're mainly doing mundane stuff like the kid who with the electricity powers, having to charge up the tractor on the battery on the guy's tractor, and
Hmm.
uh, you know Ida helping the old lady, carrying her around, and yeah,
Yep, just a lot of community support.
yeah,
Uh, it's really the type of thing where it actually makes sense to have your younger, inexperienced heroes do that, because it builds up general popular support for superheroing, which, given the type of resources that the heroes in that universe are shown to use, and the fact that they are agencies but they aren't like charging for their services, that makes me think that there must be some heavy taxes to support superheroing in general.
yeah, oof,
So you kind of want to make people like you.
yeah, and
But
plus it's also character building for the kids.
yep. It's like, yeah, like I said, this is the apology. Every character from the main class is there. Every character from the main class gets moments of varying degrees of coolness,
Yeah,
appropriate to their characters' powers and skill sets.
right. Yeah, um, and so I guess the should get to the some of the plot of the movie, or which as I said, the aforementioned villain he's called Nine, and he's basically borrowing the same powers as All for One, where he steals other people's quirks.
Mhm.
But what happens is he steals the quirk of this one guy. What was the? Oh yeah, cell. It was cell regeneration or cell. I can't remember what it was. Something
Was
like
it
that.
cell enhancement, maybe?
Yeah, something like that. Um, and but the when he stole it, and he stole it because the more quirks that he would use, and the more longer he would use them, it would wreck his body. So he
Right.
needed this like ability so that he could keep just using the quirks unimpeded. But unfortunately, the quirk he stole doesn't work with his blood type.
Hmm.
So he has to go to the island where the guy's son and daughter are living, and his son has the same ability, but he has the right blood type. So he's going over there to steal the kid's quirk.
Yep. And our heroes have something to say about that.
Yes.
There's also a subplot where the kids, like the brother and sister, was it the sister who hated superheroes?
He has a sister. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's like the plot was them getting over it.
Yeah.
So I'll say that. So I would say every one of these Shonen Jump movies, and I'm gonna like Dragon Ball being a big example. It was always like a echo of something in the series. And so this was basically a way to give people a prelude fight of like Deku versus All for One without actually having him fight All for One.
Yeah.
It's like, eh,
Yeah. And the other part of it, the other kind of subplot in there too is where with Deku and Bakugo basically putting their differences aside and fighting together.
it's kind of the other big focus, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
because I guess what was another complaint people might have had about the previous movie? You have these two characters who are basically like Bakugo is like the Vegeta, and he and Deku don't really interact in that first movie.
No, they don't. Just I think there was one little part in the at the beginning with the where they were like competing against each other for racing up the uh a mountain, like one of those like rock climbing things.
Yeah, that was like their only scene where they actually did anything together.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would say this movie is like I said, it's an attempt at some fan service. There's a plot line at the end that just really bugged me, though.
Which one?
Uh,
The
so, I think so. Quick non-spoiler thing. If you like My Hero Academia, but you didn't see this movie because you didn't go to see it in the theater at the time and you just weren't aware of it, it is a fine action movie. Just accept that the events in it don't matter. Every character gets to do cool things. It has all the My Hero things that you would want to see them do.
yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it's not they're not reinventing the wheel. It's not doing anything you know fun or crazy or anything like that. It is very much a standard, My Hero Academia story, and yeah, if you're a fan of it, you'll get some enjoyment out of it.
Now, that being said, getting into the spoilers, there's a bit at the end, and this is actually amusingly enough in the photo I found here, that in the
Oh,
opinion of my
okay.
friend and the friends that uh, I watched the movie with at the time, uh, is rather lore breaking with the mechanics of One for All.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. I remember now. Yeah. Yeah. You're referring to when Deku gives Bakugo one for all.
Right. Which, for the, okay, God, I don't know what I'll only bother to explain it just for context,
Yeah.
uh, because like if you actually clicked on this review, you know the series. Uh, but Deku, born with no superpowers, inherits All Might's quirk, uh, One for All, which gives him super strength and later other powers from the people who have had the quirk in the past. Uh,
Yeah.
him being trapped and giving this up to Bakugo to save the day, it would be a bit like if I'm trying to think of like an analogy here. It's like if Luke could grasp Han Solo's hand and transfer all of his force abilities into him, in terms
Yeah.
of how much this would affect the series going forward if it was real.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, don't give Disney any ideas. They might do that with the Ray movie.
Oh no, you're right. but
Sorry.
but it this is like a big deal. Like this is Deku's thing,
Mhm.
and he suddenly is sharing it with Bakugo, and then at the end of the fight, he just gets it back
Yeah.
with no long-term ramifications for either, including like in theory, as Deku is starting to unlock powers that had belonged to previous wielders. If this movie was canon, he would have started, using Bakugo's quirk.
Yeah, yeah. His explosive sweat. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um, yeah.
like it feels like something that was come up with because they wanted the scene of the both of them using full cowling together,
Yeah.
like fighting as equals against this threat.
Yeah. Well, it's similar to the first movie where Deku and All Might are fighting together. Um, which I actually liked that because we didn't ever see that in the show.
Right. Whereas this was just like, again, it felt very lore breaking and very out of keeping.
Yeah.
If this had happened in the actual show, there would have been interesting long term consequences that would have also been kind of lore breaking or show breaking there too, in my opinion. But
Yeah.
they would have at least dealt with it instead of just nope, reset button, boop.
Yeah. Well, it also kind of seems like something they would have done in like season 10.
Yeah, like I said before, this is the prelude to Deku having an actual fight with All for One. So
Yeah.
it is kind of like the animators got bored waiting for season 10 and decided to just go forward with this.
Yeah.
Uh, now on an enjoyment level, I would say that I did enjoy this more than the third movie, which I reviewed a few weeks back.
Oh, the one in where they're Italy.
Yeah, Fake Europe.
Yeah.
Um, and that's because this one is just more of a turn your brain off, you get what you want. They aren't introducing new characters who you're expected to see as being worthy of basically being the stealth main character. It is about Deku and Bakugo, even if some of the events that happen are kind of silly.
Yeah.
It's just like it's like a Dragon Ball fan where you ask them, but wait, how, Emperor Cooler showed up in this movie, but uh, Gohan's hairstyle is wrong. He looks too young. There's no time in the storyline where this could have happened. You just have to go, shh, enjoy the cool fight scene.
Yeah.
This is think of this as a what if.
Yeah.
Uh, I think I enjoy this one on the same basis of look, I can have nerd nitpicky issues with the storyline, but shut up. It's cool animation. All the characters get to do cool things, and it's just like a nice superhero story.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
Now, if you have a Netflix subscription and are of a mind to watch a Shonen Jump anime movie, I'd watch the Black Clover one first, for God's sakes, because that one,
Yeah.
like Daniel will tell you, you don't even have to have watched Black Clover to enjoy that one.
No, you don't. Yeah, I went into that movie totally cold, and yeah, I still like that. Yeah.
Where this one is definitely relying more on the series to boost it up.
Hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, so mixed review, worth a watch if you like the series. If you haven't seen the series, Netflix also has some of the seasons of the show, so give
Yeah.
that a go. You'll probably enjoy yourself.
Yes, indeed.
But it's time to get to our classic review.
Yes.
The Eagle has landed.
Yes. You discovered this movie,
Yes, because the scriptwriter for this one was the director of our previous week's movie, Dragnet,
right? Yeah.
and the premise itself was so wild that I just had to give it a go.
Yeah.
Uh, it's 1943. The Germans basically have already lost the war, and it's all over but the fighting. And uh, and Mustache Man
Mhm.
goes along with a suggestion that someone makes to have Winston Churchill kidnapped to force a negotiated peace.
Yes. And the uh, the the one admiral who has been kind of thrust with the plan, he's just, with this idea, he's like, geez, I don't want to do this. He's, because
Yeah,
by this point, the mustache leader was well and truly out of his freaking mind. If he wasn't
yes,
before, he really was then. Um,
he went from being a dangerous ideologue to being a chemically imbalanced and deranged ideologue.
Yes, yeah. Um, and so so this admiral goes to Colonel Rauld, who's played by Robert Duvall, and he looks very much like a real uh, German officer, and I'm trying to remember his name.
Yeah,
Uh,
I know who you mean, like the guy with the eye patch.
yeah, he was the basically the face of the assassination attempt on the mustache leader. Um, Klaus von Stauffenberg was his name.
Mm.
Yeah, because it's the eye patch and the prosthetic arm. But yeah, he's being basically tasked with coming up with basically saying, well, do a feasibility study, see if we can actually do it, and then the colonel, he looks into it, and then he actually sees an opportunity where, oh, we could might actually be able to do this.
Right, like, oh, there's this opening. Churchill's going to be in this like lightly defended section of England for a few weeks on on a trip. So you know what?
Yeah,
Let's do this.
yeah, why not? Yeah, so he starts putting the plan together, and the commander that he wants is that's Michael Caine's character, Colonel Kurt Steiner, who he and his men are they end up serving time in a penal colony because they stop at a train yard where they witness people being taken away.
Yeah,
Uh,
yes. We were talking earlier about Holocaust movies.
yeah.
This is one of them in one scene.
Yes. And a girl tries to escape. They try to kill her, but then Michael Caine stops them, and he tries to put her on a train to to go somewhere else, but then they end up shooting her anyway. And Michael Caine gives some serious lip to the SS general.
This proves to be a poor choice.
Yes. Um, but it works out for Robert Duvall because he wants him to lead the kidnapping attempt, and then Duvall also recruits Donald Sutherland's character, Liam Devlin, who's a member of the IRA, and but he's not a typical IRA member.
Hmm.
He
Right,
yeah.
right. He has a code of a sort where he doesn't want to make bombs to target whoever happens to be there. He wants to fight the British Empire in a more direct way.
Right. Yeah. Um, and but they recruit him to kind of be their eyes on the ground for the early part of the plan. And and basically then once they get to England, it takes them a little while to get to England. It's very the first part of it's pretty slow, but then of course they eventually get there, and things seem to be going well until then they don't, and
They rather dramatically don't.
yeah, they rather dramatically don't, and it you know kind of blows up in their faces, um, because in the village that they're in, about 8 miles down the road, there's a company of Army Rangers, U.S. Army Rangers up there, and the colonel who's in charge of the company is played by Larry Hagman, who
Boy, is he an idiot.
oh yeah, he is, yeah.
Yeah.
uh,
And in fact, you notice that Larry Hagman, big enough deal on the poster here that he and his character get name dropped.
yes, well, I mean, he was Major Nelson on I Dream of Jeannie, so
Hmm.
people knew who he was.
Something of a
uh,
name, yeah.
Something of a name, yeah. for those of you wondering, this movie came out a couple of years before Dallas aired. So that's most people remember him as J.R. Ewing on Dallas. But yeah, he kind of reminded me of uh, the Army, the Air Force general in or general or colonel in that episode of The Simpsons with Sideshow Bob at the Air Force base. It was voiced
Oh
by
yeah.
Arlie Army.
See, I was thought you were going to go with Doctor Strangelove there.
Oh, a
But
little bit of that too. Yeah. Oh, that guy. Yeah. Oh yeah,
yeah,
I remember. Oh yeah.
yeah.
Um,
But let's back up a little bit.
okay.
So we have our premise set. Like Daniel was saying, we've got a pretty dynamite cast here.
Yeah.
Um, I had heard Michael Caine in some interview refer to playing a Nazi, and now I know what movie he was referring to.
Yeah. Um, yeah, as I mentioned before when we were talking about another movie where people were just using their British accents instead of, you know, other ones. Michael Caine was just like, nah, I'm just going to use my British accent. I'm not going to use a German one.
Which is funny because okay, so this movie was made in 1973,
Uh,
75,
76.
76. Okay, for a $6 million budget apparently, which
Mm,
at the time, yeah, would have gone further, but still not a super high budget movie.
yeah. Yeah.
And there's little signs of it all over the place. And in fact, in one scene, there's literally a sign where they they're on this island with this was supposed to be a German island with the penal colony,
Yeah.
and the pub in the background has signs in English. Oh, they have a small German sign on the wall, but
Mhm.
unless it was supposed to be an island, like a British island that the Germans had somehow occupied and turned into a penal colony, which doesn't seem likely.
No, that didn't seem likely, especially at that time, at that point in the war. Yeah.
Yeah, like maybe early on they could have captured an island, but British maintained naval supremacy the whole way through.
Mhm.
So good luck restocking that island. But
Yeah.
other details that were kind of interesting, where you could kind of tell that they were having to like explain certain things. Well, the boat that they're using.
Yeah.
Oh, that doesn't look. What kind of a strange boat is that? Oh, this is a British boat that we captured. It was dropping commandos off of Holland.
Yeah.
It's like why? Why? Well, because we didn't have a German PT boat,
Yeah.
and we knew that somebody was going to comment on it if we showed up if we had our British PT boat in the movie. So this is why the Germans have a captured British PT boat. Shut up.
Yeah. Yes. Well, yeah, and they even did that with Michael Caine's character, where they're like, they have to explain why he has a British accent. It's like, oh
Yeah,
well, he was educated in Britain, and yeah,
not a trace of an accent. Which, not gonna lie, that is pretty convenient for this type of story, because or
yeah,
for the type of mission he was on. But still very funny.
yeah. Um, but yeah, I thought another character I forgot to mention was the American captain, Harry Clark, he was played by Treat Williams. Who was in another movie that we had reviewed some time ago. He was the villain in The Phantom.
He was better in that one.
Oh yeah,
Um,
he was. Yeah,
in a stacked cast like this, he definitely stood out as kind of giving kind of a flat performance.
yeah, and I don't know if that was they intentionally told him to do that, or if that was just a product of his age because it was probably early in his career. Because
Yeah,
he was. I mean, this was 20 years before The Phantom.
what is going on out there?
Mhm.
Yeah. There is there's a or it's like a motorized crane going by me. What with a shovel attachment? What happened in the neighbor's area that they need that?
Oh,
Apologies for the background noise, people. But anyway,
wow.
um, so I would say that the start of the movie is very strong because you get some very nice scenes with some fairly subtle um, world building, so to say.
Yeah.
Like you hear a bombing run in the background. You just get a sense of how badly off the Germans are.
Yeah, and they had the bombing run going off, and Duval and his whatever attaché are just they're still sitting there talking like nothing was going on. Like,
Yeah, yeah. Who was in charge of the Luftwaffe again? Uh, like, what was the name of the real head of the Luftwaffe?
oh, it wasn't Himmler, was it?
Let's find out. Goring.
Goring.
They're saying they're counting. Goring assured us that that wouldn't happen again.
Right. Yeah. uh,
Um, the, but uh, Now I think that one thing I noticed was that they had a set of characters who were kind of how to put it. So it's weird to ask I believe this was made by a UK company. I think the primary audience for this was British,
yeah, probably.
so they
I,
kind of had to find a way to make the audience root for doesn't seem like the right term, but like to empathize with a cast of characters whose goal was to assassinate their leader or
yeah.
assassinate or kidnap their leader.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, there's a very fine line that they were walking there. It's a bit like it's kind of like the movie we did last week, Pain and Gain, where
Right,
we're like you're rooting for three guys who are just like total horrible people who are doing
right.
really bad stuff.
Yeah. So in that movie, the way they softened them up was to make them all completely stupid and over their heads. So they kind of almost gained an underdog quality, and by making their victim seem worse.
Yeah,
They didn't make them idiots in this movie, but they made a point of making sure that the primary characters um, all had motives that I think would track fairly well, like or that like a British audience could understand at the time.
yeah, yeah, and like I said, like the aforementioned scene with Michael Caine in the train yard, I think was obviously meant to give him some sympathy, like, oh, he's really not that bad of a guy, he,
Right. Yeah, he's a
you know,
German officer, but he disapproves of the Holocaust, so he's good.
yeah, yeah,
Oh, we have a guy who's a IRA person, but he has principles where he doesn't just want to kill randos.
yeah, yeah, and well, and they kind of had to do that at that time as well because the IRA was very active in the 70s.
Yeah.
Yeah,
In fact, that's kind of a bold choice, if you will.
yeah,
Uh, but I think it's also like they couldn't justify having too many Germans who could blend in England, so
yeah, yeah.
they had to write an Irishman into it too.
Right, yeah, yeah. Well, they were Germans posing as Polish troops.
That too. That which I would have questioned that at one point, but I hadn't realized how many Poles had actually managed to get out of Poland and into wartime UK. So that was
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah. Um, I will say the one part of the movie that I thought was the weakest, which I think you would probably agree with me, was there was a romance subplot with yeah, yeah, with Sutherland's character and yeah, the Irishman and Molly was her name, played by Jenny Agutter, who people will remember her from Logan's Run. She was also in An American Werewolf in London. More recently, she was in the MCU. She was one of the World Council members.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I didn't know
she's
that.
actually the World Council member that Black Widow impersonates in the Winter Soldier.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but yeah, they have this whole romance subplot, and I remember I was telling my talking to my parents about this movie, and my mom kind of rightfully pointed out, well, that's in there because that was the only way they could get women to go see this movie.
Yeah, yeah. No, not wrong.
Yeah,
It mean, now what I will say is that it's interesting that they throw those subplots in, but it's not like you're going to have like a boat chase scene in the middle of the Sex and the City movie to keep the men interested.
That's true. Yeah.
But that's either here nor there. Yeah, yeah. That storyline felt very tacked on, and also she was way too into him too fast.
Well, she was 18, 19 years
Yeah.
old. I mean,
Well, here's what I mean. Like I got the immediate attraction of the kind of older man of the world showing up and being kind of suave and clearly into her.
yeah,
Um, when she knew that he was an agent, and in fact, you see the shotgun there on the cover, and
yeah,
she shot the guy who in town who was sweet on her and was too possessive
yeah.
to
Shot. Yeah,
save him.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Like that's
Yeah.
bit much.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I found that kind of unbelievable. The Now the actual execution of the like once the Michael Caine and his unit actually arrive, there you have some nice tension because they're clearly trying to keep their heads down.
Hmm.
And there was a nice little detail like, okay, anytime you have a story like this, you always have to like, okay, how do they either they pull off the mission flawlessly or they get found out? How do you set it up realistically so they're found out?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
in keeping with Michael Caine's like lawful good character, he's like, "Well, I refuse to be, be seen as a spy. If we get captured, I want my men to be wearing their Nazi uniforms underneath their regular uniforms."
Yeah. They wanted to be treated as prisoners of war rather than as spies because yeah, POWs got treated better than spies.
Yep. One's covered by the Geneva Convention, one is not.
Yeah.
But and then in the course of things, one of them does something heroic and gets discovered.
Mhm.
Uh, What's also funny is that one of the locals who is actually working with the Germans, why is she working with the Germans? Oh, well, she's from South Africa, and her parents were sent to a concentration camp during the Boer War.
Yeah.
Which she said, "What do you think the Germans invented concentration camps?" Which actually is historically inaccurate in the sense that it was actually the Spanish who invented the modern concentration camp in Cuba.
Yeah. Oof.
But yeah, now as far as do they manage to kidnap Churchill or not, I think that we can leave that to the audience.
Yeah. 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 There's a twist at the end that I don't necessarily want to spoil.
No, because I don't think I loved this movie, but I think it is still worth a watch just for the strength of the performances and uh, a pretty neat premise.
Yeah, yeah, I think so too. Yeah, and of course, I mean, it's got Michael Caine in it. I mean,
Uh,
anything with Michael Caine is going to be top notch for the
Right,
most part.
right. It's gonna be elevated by having Michael Caine in it. Even Michael Caine towards the front end of his career.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, if I was gonna give any criticisms besides the tacked on romance plot,
Mhm.
I think that Sutherland's character in general just didn't really work for me.
Yeah. He he kind of he has that sort of brigand quality to him, which there's a fine line between like Han Solo and I'm trying to think of a similar character that's like that, but really annoying. Um, yeah, but he kind of does come across as very a little too arrogant, I think.
Yeah, there's also a couple too many scenes, and so Daniel, where did you watch this movie?
I watched it on Prime Video.
I ended up renting it because it was on Crackle, but Crackle wouldn't work on my console, so I just said, "Fine, I'll just give them the $4."
Yeah,
Um, how long was your cut of the movie?
2.25 hours.
Okay, Yeah, mine was like about an hour 50. So
Mm,
apparently, what we watched was like the restored version. Uh,
okay.
there was like a 90-ish minute cut of the movie that was, I believe, released originally, and
Uh,
I have to wonder if that would have been a slightly better time because like the movie is very deliberate in a lot of scenes, and like there were some parts that I kept feeling could have been tightened up.
mm, yeah. Yeah, I thought so too. I think I think the observation I made was that it kind of felt like something Christopher Nolan would do today.
Yeah,
With
actually, if we found out that he was doing a remake of The Eagle Has Landed, I would not be shocked at all.
yeah, I wouldn't either. Yeah. And speaking of which, the speaking of the director, Jim Sturgis is the director, and he had done
John
a
Sturgis.
Sturgis, sorry, John Sturgis.
Yep.
He had done he directed Gunfight at the OK Corral, which was another movie we reviewed.
Mhm.
And he also did The Great Escape and The Magnificent Seven. So he had a very
I-
impressive filmography there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is available in a variety of places. If you have Amazon Prime, it's no additional cost.
Yeah.
If you have a Crackle, well, there are no Crackle subscriptions, but if you don't mind a couple of ads, Crackle has it.
Yeah. 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 It's definitely a it's a kind of a forgotten movie.
Mm. I mean, I only stumbled on it thanks to IMDb link chasing. So
Yeah, yeah, because when you hear about World War II, great World War II movies, this one usually doesn't get mentioned all that much. I don't think.
no. Oh, and I had been very curious if this was based on a true story. Absolutely not.
No, it wasn't. Yeah, it was actually based on a novel.
Yeah. Now, if you told me that the novel was inspired by unclassified documents of plans that were entertained but never followed through on, I would believe you, but I haven't seen anything to suggest that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, who knows? Maybe maybe the mustache leader, maybe he did kind of like, oh, let's try to kidnap Churchill, and like, he's not going to remember that tomorrow. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, like which was the premise of it is that just that somebody said, "Oh, he'll have forgotten about it by Friday," but we still
Yeah,
have to carry out the order.
right. Yeah,
Just that somebody took it seriously.
yeah. Oh, and another actor that was in the movie, if we forgot to mention, Donald Pleasance plays. He's playing Himmler. Uh, he was in. He's kind of like the most iconic James Bond villain. He was Blofeld in
Mhm.
You Only Live Twice. He's the guy that Doctor Evil's parodying,
Yeah.
and he's and most people, although I think most people also know him from the Halloween franchise. He was Doctor Loomis.
Yep.
But
And I've seen him in a variety of things over the years. I think he was in Puma Man, the really awful superhero movie that Mystery Science Theater made fun of.
oh yeah, he did a few of those movies like that where he was obviously just there for the paycheck.
Yeah.
But yeah, yeah, I would definitely recommend this movie. It's not perfect, but it's enjoyable.
Yep.
Yeah,
Well, I believe that is everything we had to discuss this week.
yeah, I believe so too. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in. We appreciate it as always.
Indeed.
Yeah, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, ring the bell, all that good stuff, and we'll see you next week.
Yep.
Hi, everybody.
Not everyone.